Hello everyone, my name is Amit Jyoti. I am an assistant professor with the O.P. Jindal Global University. In this module, we shall be talking about the regional human rights system, specifically in Europe. As has been discussed all throughout in the earlier modules, there is no hierarchical order or a set constitution in the international arena which the law flows from. The international human rights law is no different. In fact, international human rights law consists of multiple layers. That is, the global system, which is micromanaged by the United Nations, the domestic system, which is micromanaged by each state, the regional systems, which are micromanaged by each region. It is this third layer that this module is going to deal with. These regional human rights systems consist of regional instruments and mechanisms that play an important role in the promotion and protection of human rights. These systems help to localize international human rights norms and standards reflecting the particular human rights concerns of the religion. Its existence is paramount for some reasons, which are: 1. The local needs and aspirations of people are more likely to be met by way of these regional instruments. 2. Some regions collectively may want to commit to higher human rights standards than could possibly be agreed to under the formation of various instruments of the United Nations. Third, global enforcement mechanisms may prove futile and a region may want stronger monitoring and enforcement mechanisms such as regional courts and commissions. Fourth, it is likely to comfort regions with the whole concept of human rights, given that some of these regions are wary that human rights is in fact only a Western notion. Currently, the three most well-established regional human rights systems that exist are in the Americas, Europe, and Africa. Having said that, there are other regional systems that are still in their infancy stage. However, they do require a mention. Accordingly, we will be studying the human rights system in the America, Europe, and Africa in greater detail in this and the following modules. Now, let us begin our discussion on the regional human rights system in Europe. The Council of Europe is a regional intergovernmental organization which promotes human rights, democracy, and rule of law in its member states. The organization is separate from the European Union, which is a political economic union. The Council of Europe established for the European Convention of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, which entered into force in 1953 and is the main European Human Rights Convention. It is popularly referred to as the European Convention on Human Rights, or simply ECHR. The said convention was drafted by the Council of Europe after the Second World War and was designed to protect individuals' fundamental rights and freedoms. Accordingly, it deals with a lot many civil and political rights and as in that sense similar to the ICCPR. It must also be pointed out that several additional protocols have been added to the substantive and procedural provisions. Let us now look at some of the primary provisions of the ECHR. The first, European Convention on Human Rights. The ECHR consists of three parts: the main rights and the freedoms are contained in the first part, which consists of Article 1 to 18. The second part consists of Article 19 to 51, which sets up the European Court of Human Rights and its rules of operation. Finally, the third part gives out some miscellaneous provisions which deal with rules overall and not falling within the ambit of either Part 1 or that of Part 2. European Court of Human Rights. The machinery for enforcement of human rights under the ECHR is the most developed in Europe. And in fact, some scholars refer to it as one of the most efficient human rights system in the world. By Protocol 11 of the European Convention on the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, a single permanent court, which is called the European Court of Human Rights, was established in order to maintain and improve the efficiency of protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. In fact, the previous mechanism composed of the European Commission on Human Rights and the European Court of Human Rights was abolished only after Protocol 11 took effect. In its previous classical format, once someone had pursued all avenues to have their rights vindicated by the legal system of the country where they find themselves, they could approach the European Commission on Human Rights. The Commission then would give the state an opportunity to respond and then decide whether there has been a violation. This decision did not, however, by itself carry the force of law. To obtain such a result, the case had to proceed to the European Court of Human Rights, where legally binding decisions were issued on whether a state party has violated the treaty. The European Court of Human Rights is a judicial body composed of a number of judges equal to the number of states that are current members of the Council of Europe. Judges are elected by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe for a term of 6 years. In this regard, it is also important to note that judges are required to sit on the individual court in their individual capacity only. More so, to consider cases brought before it, the court sits in committees of 3 judges, in chambers of 7 judges, and in a grand chamber of 17 judges. There are 2 main stages in which the consideration of cases that are brought before the court takes place. 1, the admissibility stage, and 2, the merit stage. The processing of an application goes through these phases. A committee finding that an application is not admissible will declare the case to be inadmissible by a unanimous vote. And this decision of the committee cannot be appealed against. If, however, no decision is taken by the committee on admissibility, a chamber shall decide on its admissibility. If, however, the application is found admissible, a chamber will give notice of the case to the respondent government for their observations. Written observations are submitted by both parties. Ultimately, the chamber delivers a judgment that will become final only after the expiry of a 3-month period during which the applicant or the government may request the referral of the case to the Grand Chamber for a fresh consideration. The Grand Chamber only accepts these requests if the case raises a serious question affecting the interpretation or application of the convention or the protocols thereto, or a serious issue of general importance. The judgment of the Grand Chamber shall be final, however, and there can be no appeal to it. Let us now discuss the enforcement mechanism. The European Court of Human Rights may receive applications from any person, including group of individuals who claim to be a victim of a violation by one of the state party to the ECHR. The only admissibility criteria for hearing such applications are: A. All domestic remedies must have been exhausted. B. The application to the ECHR must have been filed within 6 months from the date on which the decision in that point, as previously discussed, would have been taken. C. The application must be anonymous. D. The application must not contain a substantially same matter as has already been examined by the court. And E. The application must not have been submitted to another procedure of international investigation or settlement and contain no relevant new information. Furthermore, the state parties to the convention in fact undertake to abide by the final judgment of the court in any case to which they are parties. In any event, however, the concerned state does not abide by the decision. The court transmits its judgment to the Committee of Ministers, which further supervises its execution. The Committee of Ministers is the Council of Europe's decision-making body, which comprises of the foreign affairs ministers of all the member states or their permanent diplomatic representatives. The committee's work is carried out mainly at the 4 regular meetings that take place every year, which take the shape of annotated order of business. The committee completes each case by adopting a final resolution which is made public. Now let us discuss very briefly some of the landmark judgments of the European Courts of Human Rights. Since 1998, it has sat as a full-time court and individuals can apply to it directly. Since its inception, the court has delivered more than 16,000 judgments. These are binding on the countries concerned and have led governments to alter their legislation and administrative practice in a wide range of areas. The most violated provision of the European Convention is Article 6, which speaks of the right to a fair trial, then the reasonable time requirement. The next most frequent violations are under Article 1 of Protocol number 1, which is protection of property, and Article 5 of the Convention, which is right to liberty and security. Apart from rulings on these violations, the court has most frequently given judgments on abortion, assisted suicide, body searches, domestic slavery, adoption by homosexuals, wearing religious symbols at school, the recognition of transsexuals, the protection of journalists, sources, and even environmental issues. The first case that we shall discuss is Gurucciani versus Spain, decided on 15 December 2009. Gurucciani, the applicant, was sentenced to 18 months imprisonment for an attempted house burglary in 2002 and was later released on license. However, his conviction was upheld and appeal petition dismissed by the Constitutional Court. In the meantime, the Spain police authorities requested the judge responsible for the enforcement of the judgment against the applicant to issue directions for the applicant's removal from the country in accordance with the applicable enforcement procedure. This request was accompanied by the 2002 order of a regional arm of central government which ordered the administrative removal of the applicant according to Institutional Law of 2000, a Georgian citizen living illegally in Spain. Later, when the matter went to the criminal court, it found it more appropriate to impose sentence. But the appellate court accepted the prosecutor's contention to deport the applicant from Spain and additionally impose a 10 years ban on his re-entry. According to the domestic criminal laws applicable, where an illegal immigrant in Spain was given a prison sentence of up to 6 years, there was an obligation to replace that sentence by deportation, save in exceptional cases. The court held that the replacement of the applicant's 8-month prison sentence by his deportation and 10-year exclusion from Spain without allowing him to appear before the court and without taking into account any circumstances had to be regarded as a sentence in the same sense as that originally imposed. A heavier penalty was imposed on him with a retrospective effect. Therefore, the court found Spain violating Article 7 when Guruciani was given a harsher sentence than that which had been originally for in respect of the offence for which he was convicted. The next case that we will discuss is Saldas versus Turkey of 27 November 2008. Turkish law provided for an access to lawyer for any accused as soon as he is taken into custody unless he was charged for an offence falling within the jurisdiction of the state security courts. Applicant, a minor, was arrested on suspicion of aiding and abetting an illegal organization, an offence triable by the state security courts. And he gave an admission statement to the police about his participating in the unlawful demonstration. This statement was made without a lawyer being present there. Later, before investigating judge, he retracted from the statement as taken by duress, from where he was remanded to custody and allowed to access a lawyer. Even at trial, he continued to deny his statement, but the court held his initial police confession to be reliable and punished him with a 30-month imprisonment. Under Article 6, Clause 1, for fair trial to remain sufficiently practical and effective, access to lawyer had to be provided. As a rule, from the first police interview of a suspect, unless it could be demonstrated that in the particular circumstances there were compelling reasons to restrict that right. In the given case, denial of an access to the lawyer on pretext of offence falling within the jurisdiction of state security courts was found unjustifiable. Applicant's age was also an important point for the court to arrive at a decision against Turkey. Therefore, the court found Turkish authorities in violation of Article 6, that is, right to a fair trial, when the applicant was charged and convicted for a statement admitting guilt while in custody without a lawyer. Next is the case of Schwab and MG versus Germany, decided on 1st December 2011. The German authorities detained 2 men for 5 days to prevent them from participating in demonstrations against the G8 summit of head of states and government held near Rostock in Germany. They were arrested when the police found banners bearing the inscription which read, freedom to all prisoners, and free all now from their van while checking. The district court and the appellate court found that with their banners, the applicants had intended to incite others to free prisoners from the Waldeck prison and ordered their detention, even though no criminal proceedings were initiated against them. The court was therefore not convinced that the applicants' continuing detention could have reasonably been considered as necessary to prevent them from committing a sufficiently concrete and a specific offence. Nor could it have been justified under Article 5(1)(b) in order to secure the fulfillment of any obligation prescribed by law, since the police had not ordered them to report to a police station in their own town of residence or prohibited them from entering the area in which the summit-related demonstrations were taking place. Therefore, the court held German authorities responsible for violating Article 5(1) that talks of right to liberty and security. Also, their detention for the entire duration of G8 summit, which was almost 60 days, without finding any concrete evidence of violent intentions, was held to be violation of Article 11, which is freedom of assembly and association. Thank you for listening to this module.